Romans chapter 8, verse 29 is such an encouraging verse. We all know the verse. It says in Romans 8, 29, we know that all things work together for the good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. We love the fact that God is working all things, not just some of the things in our lives, not just the big things, not just the easy things, all things. God's working it all together. God has a plan. God has a purpose. You're going through some things right now. I want to encourage you. God has a plan. God has a purpose. And He's working it for the good. He's got a good end result here. It's going to have a good result in your life. Think about all the people in the Bible that went through very difficult and hard things before they were able to end up in a very good place. David went through 7 years of misery in the wilderness before he could become the king of Israel. Joseph went through 13 years of slavery and imprisonment before he was ready to become the prime minister of Egypt. Go through a lot of difficult things. Peter went through his own failure and disappointment before he was ready to become the great preacher on the day of Pentecost. We all go through hard things, and God's able to work all those things together for our good and for the good of what He wants to accomplish. The goal of all that, we don't usually read verse 29, but it says this, for those He foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son. What's God's goal in all this? What's God's goal in working all things together for the good? It's to conform you and I to the image of His Son. It's to make us more like Jesus. There's areas of your life where you don't let God touch. You've got a do not disturb sign on that area of your life. God's going to work all things, including difficult and painful things, to get to that area of your life so that He can work in that area of life and make you more like Jesus so He can ultimately use your life to do more good things for other people. But there's a requirement for all this happening. God wants to conform you to the image of His Son. He's promised to use all things working together for the good to get there, but you got to do your part. It says, for those who love God and who are called according to His purpose. Realize God is more interested in His purpose than your pleasure. God's more committed to your character than your career. God's more excited about His calling than your comfort and your convenience. So you've got to surrender yourself and submit yourself to His purpose for this thing that you're going through, His purpose for your life. And the other thing is you've got to keep loving Him. Sometimes it's hard to love God when things are hard. It's hard to love God when your prayers aren't being answered. It's hard to love God when it's difficult. But if you want God to work it all for good, you want God to make you more like Jesus, you got to keep loving Him and staying on purpose no matter what you're going through.